argument is just about utility. Now, the second thing that I want to pick up on before I start my substantive case is we were accused by Oliver of harking back to the 1980s. And that's just nonsense, folks. Now, there was a report given by 5 commanders in the US, Britain, Germany, France, Netherlands, that was presented to NATO just last month. And it's going to be debated in August. And the commanders were talking about nuclear strategy for NATO and the need to reconsider this strategy and reaffirm it, actually. But they also said that the West right now is struggling to summon the will to defend themselves and to realise that there is still a clear and present threat in this world. And furthermore, folks, it's important to realise that whilst we might say there are no states with nuclear weapons that would attack us right now, that's not to say that won't be the case in 20, 30 years' time, that things might be very different. In fact, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, a former Foreign Secretary, said in the debate in the Commons that he was concerned about potential Russian aggression in the future. There's no way to know, folks. It's just too contingent. There's no way to know. So we perhaps do need to keep them for that reason. And I think it's dangerous to think we're only talking about the 1980s because we just don't know what's around the corner. In fact, in their white paper, the government outlined several key reasons as to why security in the future might get worse with the risk of climate change, overpopulation, etc., etc. And the government says there is at least a chance that the security situation won't deteriorate. Now,
get into the intervention?
Please.
Simple question. Could you tell us all what scenario you envisage if you were Prime Minister, you would use Trident?
Yes, certainly. I certainly will come on to that. If I could deal with another argument first, and then I will come on to that, because that's actually the second element of my substantive case, and that's pivotal. The first thing I want to look at is that in actual fact it's really impossible for us to get rid of Trident and nuclear weapons generally, folks. And the second issue I want to move on to is the fact that Britain would use them, because that's vital, because if we wouldn't, then the first argument about deterrence is actually pointless. But to consider this first item first. Now, Mr. Rumble said he wasn't opposed to nuclear weapons, or the ones we've got just now, but he was opposed to Trident. Well, folks, it's one and the same thing, just to clarify that. Because Trident only lasts, or was only designed to last, till 2027. It takes 17 years to build submarines. That means we need to start in 2010 to build these new and develop these new submarines. Therefore, we need to take this decision now. And if we don't, we will not have a nuclear deterrent in 17 years. So this is about, do we keep our nuclear deterrent? That's the first thing. Secondly, this concept of mutually assured destruction, what does it mean? Well, it basically says if one country uses nuclear weapons on the other, then that will result in the total destruction, essentially, of both states. That's what this means. It's a kind of guarantee. And that it's essential to threaten the other side with attacks so that they won't use these weapons on you. So basically the idea, folks, is that if countries use nuclear weapons, they're so scared about the consequences themselves, i.e. total destruction, that there's no calculation under which that will be worthwhile for them to do that. And that's the reason why mutually assured destruction, or that's the argument presented in favour of it. Now, why will no one get rid of their weapons? Because obviously we can all agree that if everyone just got rid of them, then it would be fine, because there'd be no nuclear weapons there, there'd be no risk, then we need to worry about mutually assured destruction. And this comes back to this economics theory called games theory. And now I'm no economics expert, folks, but even I can understand this, that generally people act in their own self-interest, and states act in their own self-interest. They do what they think is safest for them. Now, they realise that they can't force anyone to drop their nuclear weapons. They can't go in and get them, they can't drag them away. So, they need to rely on agreements, etc., etc. And any rational state will reason that if they get rid of their weapons and other countries don't, then they might be incredibly wrong. Whereas, if they keep their weapons and other countries keep their weapons, then the status quo's there. If they keep their weapons and other countries get rid of them first, then it's still safer for you. So, the rational course of action for anyone to follow is always to keep their nuclear weapons. And that's what games theory tells us. And that's the economics, folks. That's the science.
One last intervention?
Please.
And if that were the case, and if that were true, why did South Africa give up its nuclear program? Why has Ukraine withdrawn from the nuclear program? There is a case already of unilateral. We're not arguing unilateral, we're talking about engaging with others to reduce.
Right. So why Britain in particular? That's a good question, but Barney answered that. And there are a few reasons for that. First of all, it's because the Non-Proliferation Treaty envisages that 5 states ultimately do have nuclear capabilities. And indeed, the Non-Proliferation Treaty depends on that. Because as we've already said, folks, if this idea of, if everyone got rid of the nuclear weapons, that doesn't mean that someone else won't go and develop them in the future. And this is perhaps another reason why the rational course of action is for you to actually retain them, to prevent other people doing it because of this doctrine of mutually assured destruction. So what that means, therefore, is that it's actually in Britain's interest still to retain the nuclear weapons in this case. And also, Britain has a unique position in the world, in that, one, it was one of the main states that had them in the past, so there's an element of historical accident here, so it has this role to kind of fulfil the protection of safety under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But also, and furthermore, Britain does have interests throughout the world to an extent that not many other states do, folks, and has a foreign policy that reaches all across the world, and Britain is a bit more of a target than other countries in the world, so we think it's important to retain Britain's nuclear capabilities. And this comes on to the last issue about would Britain ever use them, because this is pivotal. Now folks, we think that they would. Now in their white paper, the government says, and I will quote from you, "We deliberately maintain ambiguity about precisely when, how and at what scale we would contemplate use of nuclear deterrent. We will not simplify the calculations of a potential aggressor by defining more precisely the circumstances in which we might consider the use of our nuclear capabilities. Hence, we will not rule in or out the first use of nuclear weapons." But the government's quite clearly stating there, folks, we are prepared to use them. And this is key, because we need to see we're prepared to use them. Otherwise, in actual fact, this whole mutually assured destruction point is pointless, because if we wouldn't use them, then there's no deterrent effect, there's no threat in the other country. And so we need to say we would use them. Recently in 2006, Jacques Chirac reasserted France's commitment to use them if they were attacked, and Britain needs to say the same thing. As William Hague said, it's an ill-advised, indeed a national act of folly to get rid of them. He said that in the House of Commons. We agree, folks. We need to keep these weapons. We never know what's around the corner, and there could come a stage where Britain's security or a NATO country's security is attacked, and the only way to ensure that other countries that have nuclear weapons won't also use them too might be to attack another country with nuclear weapons. We hate this idea, folks. We think it's horrible, but unfortunately that's the way things are, and it's vital that Britain keeps their nuclear capabilities. We beg to oppose a motion.
I think at this point we will open it up